I've got my huge cup of tea here and I am ready to rank eyeshadow palettes. We've got this. I did this ranking like exactly 5 minutes ago, and if you asked me 5 minutes after I have filmed the video, I might even change my mind about the ranking. This is how hard some of these were to place. Like, I think my top 2 were no question. I knew immediately what was going to be in my top 2, but past the top 2, the order could change any day depending on my mood. I don't know if I've ever made a playlist of all of the rankings that I've done of my eyeshadow palettes in the past years, but maybe I will make one and I will just add this video to that, because I think it's really interesting to see the evolution of my rankings and to see, first of all, how my consumption as a customer has changed over the years, but also how my taste has changed over the years. When I started doing these, I had 20 eyeshadow palettes of like a whole lot of variety of brands. There was Pat McGrath, there was Juvia's Place, Anastasia Beverly Hills. We were still in the phase of literally trying everything. And in the following 2 years, you're going to notice immediately that 2 things happened. First of all, I got really scared of myself and the amount of eyeshadow palettes that I was buying. And second of all, I discovered how much I love Pat McGrath, and I thought, why the fuck do I ever need to buy anything else but Pat McGrath, sprinkled with like an occasional Natasha Denona or another brand. I think maybe Melt Cosmetics. You're going to see some Melt Cosmetics eyeshadow palettes popping up in there. And this year, once again, the eyeshadow palette number has increased because I went through yet another exploratory, adventurous phase, this time trying not indie eyeshadow palettes, but trying luxury brands eyeshadow palettes. So in this year's ranking, I'm actually going to be including a whole of 14 eyeshadow palettes, and I'll be completely utterly honest with you, I don't know that I am very happy about this. I'm not proud of myself for buying this many eyeshadow palettes, because I prided myself the previous 2 years on keeping it in the range of 10 or even under 10. But then again, how will you know if you don't try? I think now I'm a little bit also done trying the luxury eyeshadow brands, because I've basically tried most of it, or most of it that has any sort of appeal to me. Without further ado, shall we just get into the ranking, because that's what you're here for. Of course, I'm going to do this in an ascending order, so we're going to start at the bottom, and at the bottom we have my newest eyeshadow palette, which is the Victoria Beckham Signature Eyeshadow Color Quad. Now, there are several reasons why this is ranking at the bottom. First of all, because I've had it for an extremely short amount of time, so I haven't really had the time to develop truly like a relationship with it, but most of all because it is a collection of beige to brown matte eyeshadows. Matte eyeshadows do not give me joy. To me, they're like a pragmatic item. Let's use an analogy here. It's like buying a fancy Dyson vacuum cleaner because it's pragmatic and you want to get the job done fast and well. I've never heard of anyone who actually gets excited about buying a vacuum cleaner. And this is a very similar case. But at the same time, I want to give it to the poor thing that 10 out of 10 in terms of packaging. I don't think any other luxury brand does the packaging as luxuriously as Victoria Beckham does. Every little detail about it is thought out, every little detail about it fits the aesthetic of Victoria Beckham, and not only is the packaging gorgeous, but the contents of it are also really high quality. I'm actually wearing the light beige and the 2 brown shades today through my crease and outer corner, and every time I use them, they're just such a pleasure to work with. They blend out really easily. They have a little bit of like a smoothing effect on the skin, like a little bit of that blurring effect, and this does exactly the job that I bought it to do. I wanted it to look pretty, so that when I look at it, I get joy out of the fact that I'm pulling it out from my drawer, and it is utilitarian. I use this whenever I want just something simple, like brown shades to my crease and then popping whatever eyelid shade that I have in mind, without having to dig into other eyeshadow palettes or think about what kind of other browns are going to fit with the look. Because what I also really enjoy about these browns is that they're very neutral. They're not warm toned, they're not cool toned, they're just neutral. So I don't want anyone to click away from this video thinking that I rank this lowest because I don't like it. Au contraire, I love this. I actually like it more than the quad that is ranking a little bit higher than this. It's just that I can't rank a quad of basic bitch matte brown shades above anything else. At number 13, we have the SUQQU Signature Color Eyes in 115. And if we were to go by feelings of joy from using the eyeshadow. I actually experience less joy when I use this compared to the Victoria Beckham signature quad. But this is a lesson learned. I learned something from purchasing this quad, and it is a classic example of it's not you, it's me kind of situation. You know, when you are single and your friends are like, oh, you should go out with this guy, he's just such a nice guy, and you know that this guy's probably not going to be for you, but you still go on the damn date because your friends speak really highly of the dude. This is a classic example of that. I purchased this quad because, first of all, I've been really curious about the brand SUQQU for years. They are a Japanese luxury brand, and everything they make just always looks so effortless, chic, elegant, and like grown-up professional woman. The second and biggest reason is that one of the people whose opinion I cherish the most when it comes to makeup, Claudia, I'm going to link her channel in the description box below, always speaks so highly of SUQQU eyeshadows. However, this experience has taught me a few things. And I also touched on this in my video about the lessons that I learned in my 10 years of shopping for makeup, which is that I should not try to be Claudia. I should not try to emulate to be Claudia because we have very different circumstances and very different tastes. There are a couple of actual like deficits when it comes to this quad, but I think that overall the formula is really lovely. It looks really beautiful on the lid. These are extremely, you know, elegant textures to put on your lids. But here we get into, you know, my expectations and my style versus what the reality of this quad offers. I like pigmented, high shine, metallic, sparkly eyeshadows. Does SUQQU offer any of that? No, they don't. I do not have textured eyelids, so I am not on the hunt for eyeshadow formulas which, you know, look blurring on the eyelids. At least at this point in my life, I've never really noticed eyeshadow formulas that look more unflattering on my lids because I have more texture. So is that an issue that I need to tackle? No. And finally, I don't work in a highly conservative environment where someone is going to look at me disapprovingly for wearing the usual type of makeup that I wear, which is a little bit more vibrant and impactful and glittery. So maybe everything that I dislike about this quad is going to make it sound perfect for you. So in the end of the day, I think this quad is a perfect example of how our different styles, expectations, and realities in life can have an effect on what we enjoy. Now, with that being said, I also do have actual, like, legit criticism for this quad, and that is how incredibly, like, one note it is. So just to quickly go over the textures that are in here, there is a matte eyeshadow. These two over here are what I would call like a satin matte with the lightest bit of shimmer in it, and this shade is actually a little bit of a topper moment with like these beautiful like yellow base and purpley bluey sparkles. Overall, I can get really pretty looks out of this. However, these three eyeshadows on the eyelids look almost indistinguishable from each other. For example, this shade and this shade, they're different textures, but once you put them next to each other, because these shades here, the satin metallics, lean very much into the matte texture, they look almost the same on the lid. And this shade in particular, first of all, looks... I will swatch these for you. I don't really want to swatch too many eyeshadows, but I'm going to swatch these two for you. Can you tell the difference? There is like a minute difference between the two, with this one being just slightly more rosy and this one being slightly more bronzy. While I have nothing against monochromatic eyeshadow palettes, I do think that a quad, of all things, something that has very few eyeshadows, needs to give you a little bit more variety. There needs to be just a little bit more variation in the tones, because I feel like I've paid for 4 eyeshadows, but essentially I'm getting like 2 tops 3 eyeshadows out of this. And my second criticism is that this eyeshadow is actually not great quality. I don't like it. You apply it on your lids and then it has a bit of a sheen, and then you start blending it out and it kind of like blends itself away. So in conclusion, I'm probably going to keep this quad for now because I do like the really rich, vibrant, bronzy chocolate look that I can get from it, especially in the summer. But truth be told, if I did not have this eyeshadow palette in my collection, I probably wouldn't miss it. At positions number 12 and 11, I am ranking my Tom Ford quads. And this is a really hard one, and honestly, depending on the day, they may just like swap places continuously, so I'm finding it really hard to tell you which one I like more than the other. In fact, I just changed my mind about this ranking because I had written it in the opposite order in my iPad here, but I am going to rank the Body Heat quad in position number 12. FYI, both quads that I have from Tom Ford are in his wet and dry formula because that is my preferred choice when it comes to his quads. I feel like his quads are quite expensive and I am willing to pay for Tom Ford because I really like Tom Ford as a designer and as an artist, but I'm not willing to pay for his regular ass eyeshadows, which are how to put it tactfully, a little bit underwhelming. I found them a little bit underwhelming. I know he has released this new like cream to powder formula. I've never tried that one, so I can't speak to that one. But the wet and dry formula, in my opinion, is his best and like most like worth the price if you're going to go for a Tom Ford quad. They are this beautiful like gel to powder formula, which is extremely lightweight. They look very elegant on the lids. They are not overly sparkly. They have just the right amount of shimmer for someone who prefers their eyeshadows to be a little bit more subtle, but at the same time they are not quite as flat and boring in terms of their texture as, for example, to me, the SUQQU eyeshadows are. You can easily tell which my two favorite eyeshadows in this quad are because the Tom Ford logo has worn off. I think this shade is incredibly unique in terms of its tone. It is this beautiful, like rusty brownish shade. The champagne shade is also beautiful, but the reason I decided to rank this palette a little bit lower compared to the Soleil Alune, which is the other quad that I have from Tom Ford, is the fact that these two shades, these two browns, they look like they would be a different depth when you just look at them like this in the pan. You would think that you can sort of like deepen out your outer corners with this one or use it as a liner, but the matter of fact is that unfortunately you can't, because once you put them on the lid, they essentially have the same depth. And not only are they a similar depth, but I also feel like, can you really tell the difference between the two colors? I mean, there's a slight difference between them, but on the lids, if you blend them out, essentially they end up looking a little bit like the same eyeshadow. And that is the reason why I've decided to rank this a little bit lower, because again, essentially in a quad, you're getting 3 eyeshadows to work with. The reason I moved up the Soleil Alune quad to position number 11 is because, as you can tell, just by looking at the 4 eyeshadows, you're getting a lot more like variety of tones in here. You're getting this absolutely beautiful champagne eyeshadow, which, because it has a little bit of like depth to the undertone, looks very dimensional when you put it on the lid. It's one of those eyeshadows that is going to look really pretty as a one and done, because in certain lighting it will look a little bit deeper, in other lighting the sun would hit it and you would see like the sparkly shiny effect coming through. So it's a really pretty eyeshadow. Then you have this beautiful teal green moment going on here. You have this gorgeous like grayish anthracite silver type of shade, and then you have this like white highlight type of shade. I want to say this shade here has a somewhat different formula compared to the rest, or not a formula, but it comes across more as a matte than anything else. It's a very satin sort of matte eyeshadow. You can't really even see it, and on its own on the lid it would do absolutely nothing, but it does actually look really pretty in the inner corners, and I've really enjoyed it as an inner corner highlight. So because of how much more you can achieve with this quad, I'm ranking it a little bit higher. I even took this quad with me on holiday when I went away in the summer, and I got a lot of use out of all the eyeshadows that are in here. So overall, these wet and dry formula, I would recommend to like look carefully which color story speaks to you the most, where exactly you're able to get, you know, a lot of variety of different looks and also different depth in the tones of the eyeshadows. And if there is something that really speaks to you, I can only highly recommend them because I think they're really good quality. We're getting into the top 10, where at the position number 10 we have the DIOR Soft Cashmere Quint. Now, this was an incredibly impulsive, like spur of the moment, didn't really quite think it through purchase, and I think it was maybe around the time that the Moonlit Seduction had already come out, and it wasn't really what I wanted it to be, which is like a cool toned, finally like a cool toned color story from Pat McGrath, which contains baked shades that are in a taupe color and with a little bit of sparkles, and I was just longing for a cool toned monochromatic story. And then one of you mentioned this quint to me on Instagram. So these eyeshadows are all baked, but in my opinion they are also like different types of baked textures in here. here. So you have this matte eyeshadow and this like satiny type eyeshadow. So these two over here, which are more of like a classic baked formula. Then you have this one, which is a baked but also high shine, high metallic, like glittery type of eyeshadow, like glittery for like DIOR standards. Then you have this one in the middle here, which in my opinion imitates more like the baked gelée type of formula, and you have this one, which is like a baked topper shade. Now, my biggest criticism of this palette is this baked topper shade, because it is essentially a finishing powder with a little bit of glitter in it. It just doesn't really do much, but I'm also willing to give it a pass because I think that has more to do with my like personal unmet expectations that we talked about before, rather than a fault of the actual product. Because I think purchasing something from a luxury brand like this, you need to realize that luxury brands cater to a very specific type of audience. But at the same time, I feel like this quint taps into all of these different tastes really well without overdoing any of them. And what I really enjoy about this quint is also the fact that you get a little bit of different like tones and depths of the tones. So for example, you have these two browns over here, with this one being a little bit more of like a classic, more gray toned taupe shade, and this one, which is a little bit more of like a rosy taupe brown shade, being a little bit more of like a neutral cool toned moment. It's definitely not warm toned. Then you have this beautiful deep like chocolate brown, like a true deep chocolate brown in an exceptional formula, which works really well with the rest of the textures in here. And then you have this like really high shine metallic shade. This shade is really, really pretty. I mean, look at that gorgeous dimensional shine. And yes, you can't really do much with this one. You can add it on top of your looks to add like the most subtle amount of glimmer that you have ever seen. You'll have to like use a magnifying glass to find that glitter in there. But you know, I understand that for the audience to which this is targeted, this serves its purpose perfectly. I always really enjoy the looks that I create with this palette. I feel like they're timeless. They always make me feel really elegant and really chic. So there's very little I can fault this palette for, to be honest. So I highly recommend it. At position number 9, we have another extremely well done neutral quad from a luxury brand, and this is the Guerlain Royal Jungle Quad, which this thing just won't stay up, so let me hold it like this. And this in fact is going to be the last like truly like classic luxury brand mention in this ranking. So I want to specifically point to the fact that I am ranking this in the position number 9, but I'm also ranking this highest out of all the luxury quads that I have tried this year. And I think it really deserves its spot because it is such a good quad. In terms of formula, this is on par with the Wet n Dry formula from Tom Ford, because for all intents and purposes I would call these textures like dupes of each other, because this is in that same like gel to powder, very lightweight on the lid kind of formula. But where this slightly excels above the Tom Ford quads is, first of all, look at this beautiful deep brown shade. Immediately you're given the option to go really smoky. Immediately you're given the option to create a little bit more definition in your looks. Not to mention that the formula of this is exceptional. This is a dark brown which will never give you a single fleck of fallout. It is so good. This dark brown shade just like gives me a jolt of joy. I deeply enjoy the brown smoky eye that I get when I pair these two shades together. This gold shade I mentioned also in my revisiting video is the one that I have used the least, and it's just that out of all the golds that I have in my collection, this is just not one that stands out to me. But what really stands out, and the reason I'm ranking this the highest, is this toppery type shade over here, because out of all the luxury brands and all the like toppery type shades, you're probably not going to be able to see this. I'm sorry. Okay, this was completely pointless because you're not going to be able to see anything, but out of all the like luxury brands trying to do a topper type of shade, to me this is the best iteration yet, because it is not quite the level of glitter that Pat McGrath gives you. Honestly, none of these are or are ever aiming to be, but at the same time this is also not quite as subtle. So I am satisfied when I look at my eyelids under artificial light and I do my like little brown smoky eye moment and I put this all over my lids. I see this sparkle and it is so dimensional. And like this shade, if you look at this shade, under artificial lighting, it is like a beautiful rainbow, a beautiful, elegant rainbow. So when you put the color story, the texture, the versatility, and the amount of shine and glimmer that I get from this, this Guerlain quad absolutely ranks the highest, and I really, really enjoy it. At number 8 we have another really neutral eyeshadow palette, actually not simply an eyeshadow palette but also a face palette, and because of that versatility I'm going to rank this a little bit higher than all the quads, because aside from the fact that you're getting 5 eyeshadows, you're also getting like this cream to powder blush and this beautiful highlighter, exceptional formulas. Both of these I really enjoy these. I cannot even begin to tell you how much I enjoy the looks that I have done with this eyeshadow palette. Every single time I'm just so incredibly happy with the final results, because I like the tones of these eyeshadows. I don't mind that I don't have the depth, because when I use these two metallic shades here, the light champagne and the rose gold, I never really have the urge to put something really dark in my outer corner. I felt like this is just meant to give you a more toned down glam neutral look, and I love it for that. And obviously I'm going to repeat myself for like the millionth time here, but Natasha Denona is doing something really right with the formula that she has put in terms of the metallic shades in both of these like face glam and eye palettes, and it is an absolute mystery to me why she's holding that formula hostage and never putting it in her midi format palettes, because I've never seen this featured in any other eyeshadow palette besides maybe the gold palette, which featured eyeshadows that had like that similar like wet lid effect, but still not quite the same formula. This texture she has only ever featured in these Glam face and eye palettes. I've never seen it in a midi palette, and I think that is a huge mistake, because finally Natasha Denona not only has beautiful good quality eyeshadows and interesting color stories, but also a formula that finally stands out, because something that I think Natasha Denona doesn't do quite well is textures that stand out. Her color stories are nice, her eyeshadow formulas are really good, they're great quality, but they don't stand out, whereas this stands out. So Natasha, give it to us. Alright, we are at position number 7 in the ranking, and you were probably wondering when all of those Pat McGrath palettes are finally starting to pop up. Let me start by featuring Celestial Nirvana at position number 7 in this ranking. So this is the newest Mega Mothership that was released for the holiday 2022. And unlike last year's Mega Mothership palette, which ended up being my absolute favorite palette of the year, this one is ranking a little bit lower. I still stand by my opinion that the Celestial Odyssey Mega Mothership from last year is a superior palette, but let's again talk about personal taste and personal expectations. Celestial Odyssey was a very different palette. Celestial Odyssey had very few mattes, it had a lot of like very dimensional metallic eyeshadows, which are for the most part lacking in the Celestial Nirvana palette. I am sometimes overly critical of Pat McGrath releases, but I also want to be fair. The release of this palette was, in my opinion, a very clever move on her side, because it's different, it's nothing like what she has given us before, and it features something that a lot of people have been asking her to do, which is give us colorful matte eyeshadows. There are 9 colorful eyeshadows in this palette, and you know what? To no one's surprise, the matte eyeshadows in here are actually a really fabulous formula, and they give you the freedom to experiment so much with the looks that you can create not only with this palette but also with your other Pat McGrath palettes when you incorporate this one sort of as a sidekick. Everyone's always excited about who gets, you know, the Oscar for best movie or best actress or best actor, but you know what, they also give Oscars to like the best supporting act, and Celestial Nirvana would definitely get the Oscar. You know, she would not just be in the running, she would get the Oscar. Yes, she's not a leading lady, but she does the job of being a support act excellently. Slowly creeping up to the top 5. At position number 6, I am ranking the first Bridgerton release from Pat McGrath Labs. We, the Pat McGrath lover community, have been kind of harsh and quite critical of these Bridgerton releases, and I'm not saying it's not for good reason. I understand. I am just as tired of like the pinky, plummy eyeshadows as you are, but I think we should also not forget that sometimes we need to view this with new eyes, with new perspective, and take these, you know, Bridgerton releases out of the context of the rest of Pat McGrath's collection. Why am I saying this? Because then we would be able to see these palettes for what they truly are, which is something very exciting. To me, these Bridgerton palettes are like mini Mothership palettes. There are so many exciting things going on in both this and the Bridgerton II palette, starting just with the simple fact that we have her baked astral shades finally featured in a 6-pan format. And second of all, a completely new formula that hasn't even been present in her mothership palettes, represented by these shades here, which are like a baked gelée matte eyeshadow. Isn't that so exciting? We've never seen that in her mothership palettes. If we view this palette just as what it is actually a really beautiful palette. It is a little bit one note in the sense that you're not going to get a whole lot of variety of looks here, because the tones of these eyeshadows are quite similar to each other. They're like rosy, slightly reddy, a little bit purpley mauvey, but at the same time there are so many things I love about this eyeshadow palette. This plummy purple matte is just such a beautiful, like sort of like cooler leaning plum matte. This metallic shade here that I don't actually know the name of, Duchess Divinity, is truly divine. It is one of the most beautiful metallic, like purpley mauve shades that I have ever seen. The Astral shade, we don't even have to like talk about the Astral shade. Of course it is beautiful. And if it weren't for the fact that these two like eyeshadows are just not my kind of colors, they are actually a really gorgeous texture and formula to work with. So yes, this palette has a lot of shortcomings if you are a collector of Pat McGrath Labs products, but at the same time I think there is a lot with this palette that is really well done. Palettes at positions number 4 and 5 were another really difficult one, and another one that I would probably swap around depending on the day. But let's talk about Lisa Eldridge's eyeshadow palette release, you guys, because that just like came out of nowhere and blew everyone out of the water, and rightfully so. I think generally the community has been quite positive about this release. At number 5 I also have the palette that I'm partially wearing on my eyelids today, which is the Sorcery palette. And out of all the eyeshadow palettes that Lisa Eldridge has released, I think this one is probably the most interesting one in terms of like the color offerings and in terms of the textures, because this is the only eyeshadow palette that features a truly sparkly, truly duochromatic kind of shade, and this is this one over here. This is the shade Mercurial, a really gorgeous eyeshadow. To the green eyeshadow palette lovers out there, this selection is just such a joy. You get this beautiful, very unique green blue matte eyeshadow. Then you get a variety of actually different sorts of greens. You have this like more olive toned moment, you have this like more true green, like forest green type of shade, and then you get this taupe shade with a very strong like green tinge to it. The only eyeshadow that I actually don't like I truly don't like and I don't understand in this palette is the blue one over here. I don't understand what this eyeshadow is trying to do in terms of its formula, because it's not a matte, it's not a metallic, and it's just no for me. At the same time, I think you have this palette and you're trying to make the best out of it. I think it would probably make for a fabulous eyeliner or like lower lash line accent, but this is the only like dud for me in this palette, and also the reason that I'm ranking this slightly lower than Vega, which is at the position number 4, which you probably obviously guessed because these are the only two Lisa Eldridge palettes that I have. So let's talk about Vega. You're probably quite surprised that a die-hard green eyeshadow person is ranking the Sorcery palette below the Vega palette, but I just find the Vega palette to be so special. Earlier when I was talking about cool toned eyeshadow palettes, I said that the DIOR Cashmere quad is probably one of the best iterations that I have seen, and I think the Vega palette is a step up from that. Just generally speaking, there is something so special about this color story, about the eye looks that you can get from it, because they always end up looking so sophisticated and so elegant, and landed some of us in Lisa Eldridge's newsletter, which I'm very thankful that you informed me about, because I actually never received that newsletter. I would never have known that I was featured in it. And it was wearing this eyeshadow palette that got me in there, because it just looked so fabulous. It just creates the most beautiful, elegant looks, and I cannot get enough of it. But I also want to emphasize that me, someone who likes glitter, metallic and punchy eyeshadows, is ranking so highly a matte heavy eyeshadow palette. Imagine how fantastic her matte eyeshadow formula is for me to say that I would gladly go out and purchase an all matte eyeshadow palette from her. There is something exceptional about the matte eyeshadows in her palettes. I think her metallic eyeshadows are beautiful, I think the duochrome is gorgeous, but none of these formulas are something we haven't seen before. And from what I understand, some of the other palettes actually have much more subtle formulas. When it comes to the metallic shades, they're more like a satin metallic formula, so they're nothing exceptional. But her matte eyeshadows I don't know what she has done with those, but they are fabulous. They're very creamy, they're very blendable, they're very buildable, and they're just such a pleasure to work with. Overall, I think this was like such a well done eyeshadow palette release, and one that really fits the aesthetic of the makeup artist. If you look at the majority of the eyeshadow palettes that have been released within this collection, you will see that most of them are actually more subtle in terms of like the impact. The only truly impactful eyeshadow palette that you're getting is the Sorcery one. I think all the other ones are a little bit more toned down, but that also fits Lisa Eldridge's aesthetic so well. I've never seen Lisa Eldridge do like a wildly glittery, like super out there, like Pat McGrath editorial type of look. She does editorial looks, but her style is completely different. So I very much feel like when purchasing eyeshadow palettes, people really need to be aware of, first of all, who these are targeted towards based on the brand's aesthetic. And with someone like Lisa Eldridge or Pat McGrath, you should also be aware of the aesthetic of the makeup artist behind them. And you guys, we're in top 3 territory, where to no one's surprise, we only have Pat McGrath palettes left, because I've had this epiphany that out of all the eyeshadow formulas that I have tried out there, and I have tried a ton, the one that makes me feel the most confident, the most like myself, and gives me the most joy is Pat McGrath Labs. So I cannot wait to hear and see what she's going to release next year. Now that I have tried all these other formulas and I've like gotten a taste of what they are like, I'm like, you know what, I can chill now. I'm good with what I have, and if there's anything more that I'm going to add, it will be from Pat McGrath Labs. So at number 3 we have the Bridgerton II palette. Again, something that I view almost as like a mini mothership, which features not one but 2 of her baked formulas, which to me is really exceptional. We have this beautiful like pinky goldy astro shade here, and we have the Gigabyte 2.0 shade, and these are beautiful. These remain so much more special to me compared to everything else that has hit the market. I love Lisa Eldridge. I think her lipsticks are truly exceptional, but I think her eyeshadows, I don't think they're even in the same category as the Pat McGrath baked formulas. And let's take as an example this shade here. I know some of you will disagree. I know some of you prefer the olive shade in the Sorcery palette, but to me this remains a superior shade because it is more impactful, it is more unique in terms of its tones, and it just looks absolutely beautiful on the lids. And one of my personal and selfish reasons for ranking this specific eyeshadow palette so highly is because I am mad about this mint eyeshadow here. And the ironic thing is that if I just put this shade all over my lids, I am like, I feel like something's missing. But as soon as I put it in my inner corners, I literally feel drool forming, you know, here in the corners of my mouth, because it just glows when you put it in your inner corner. That is, for the most part, how I have used it. I've used it on my lids with some of the toppers from Utopian Dream, because it looks really beautiful with like topper shades all over it. But I am mad about this eyeshadow. I cannot like really give you a good reason why. I just find it to be such a like true mint shade, and I love me a mint shade. At the position number 2, of course, we've got Moonlit Seduction from Pat McGrath Labs. How can I not put a mothership in one of the highest ranking positions? Come on, let's be serious. I know I've given this palette a lot of shit and I've trash talked it a bunch over the course of the year, to the point where you probably thought this isn't going to even end up in my top 3. But in the end of the day, it remains a mothership palette. I don't know about you, but my Moonlit Seduction palette basically looks like this because I never use this plum shade. Not because it's a bad shade, not because there's anything wrong with the color or with the formula of this. It's just not the kind of color that looks flattering against my skin. Which is why I have permanently substituted this plum shade with Statuesque, which is one of her singles. Is this my favorite mothership? No. Is it ever going to be? Also no, because I'm never going to forgive it for not having baked shades. But at the same time, I've actually gotten a lot of use out of this palette. I've enjoyed every look that I have created with it. So really there's very little to fault in it, besides the fact that it doesn't have the baked shades. And in the end of the day, you know what? I'm also really happy that we got a mothership in the first place. I think we take it for granted that we're going to get a mothership. But you know what? It hasn't been easy for people who manufacture things to make those things, because there's been so much shortage, so much delays with deliveries of everything, that goes on behind the scenes that we never hear about or have to worry about. We just, you know, sit comfortably in our homes and expect that the Mothership palette is going to manifest every year. But I don't think we should take that for granted, especially not with what's been going on in the world the last couple of years. So you know what? Yeah, I'm also grateful that we just got a Mothership palette to begin with. I'm going to leave it at that with Moonlit Seduction because honestly I've already talked so much about it in my revisiting series, in the week that I've done with it, you know, during my November monthly roundup and empties. So I don't want to like repeat myself too much. I just wanted to let you know why I'm ranking this palette so high despite giving it hell during the year. And I don't even think we need a drum roll for this, not unless you have never been on my channel and this is all brand new information to you. But my number one palette this year is this little bundle of joy, the Bronze Bliss Quint that was also released with the holiday collection this year from Pat McGrath Labs. And can we just say that Pat McGrath's holiday collection this year was absolutely epic, and in my opinion the best holiday collection that was released in the year of 2022. Nobody could top that collection. There was something for each and every single person out there, and these little quints are an absolute revelation for me. I wasn't even necessarily that excited about them. I was pretty indifferent to the quints. I thought they looked really cute and I was mostly intrigued by the promise of a new formula in here, but I don't think I looked at either this or the other quint that was offered in this collection and I thought, oh my god, this is going to be my favorite eyeshadow palette of the year. So I like when little surprises like this happen, when I get something and I get so much joy out of it that I continuously reach for it in my makeup routine, and I never even think about the fact that I've been reaching for it so much until one day I'm like, wait, how many times did I use Bronze Bliss this week? Like 3 times already? Wow, that says a lot about how much you feel about something. Yes, there is actually a new formula featured in here, I think best represented by this shade here, the shade Luxury, something with luxury, Lunar Luxury, which in my opinion is one of the most beautiful, one of the most unique taupe silver shades ever. I just find these eyeshadows to be so beautiful, so dimensional, such an exceptionally well done formula for someone who has my taste, someone who likes very high shine, very impactful, very dimensional, very in your face types of eyeshadows. Look at these. This one is literally blinding my camera right now. These are gorgeous. And yes, this quint is a little bit more neutral, but you know what? It's really easy to make interesting colorful eyeshadows because all you need to do is take a color and then put somewhat of a contrasting glitter in it and you have something magical going on. Making truly exceptional, unique and interesting neutral eyeshadows is a skill that not everyone has. So yeah, Mother does it for me year in and year out. She just keeps surprising me. She just keeps pulling new things out of her sleeve and I truly cannot wait to see what she has in stock for us in 2023. Save the baked shades. Anyway, so with this I'm going to conclude this incredibly long rambling. I'm going to try to fit it into a more digestible, you know, time scale format for you so that you can enjoy this video. I don't expect you to rank all of the palettes that you have bought in this past year for me in the comment section below, but I would love to know your top 3. Now this is also the last video that I'm going to film for the year. I'm also going to post it on New Year's Day, so I hope that you have had an absolutely wonderful New Year's Eve and I wish you a fabulous 2023, and yeah, I'll see you next year. Bye!